sonicLAB Fundamental is a very different type of software instrument. It's based on older methods of making electronic music where when people only had sine tone generators at their disposal, these sort of scientific equipments that were used for calibrating and testing things, not really made for making music, but of course they made sound, so people wanted to make music with them. They were done at a time before we had the technology or even the concept of being able to hook up a keyboard or a string instrument or something like that and control the sounds with that type of traditional interface. So with Fundamental, it's really kind of a treat to be able to use a non-traditional interface like the Thunder and control all of the sine tones and the timbres with your fingertips. So let's take a look at how to set that up and get sound coming out of it and get the most out of using a control surface like this with Fundamental. So I'm using Bitwig, and in this case we have a Bitwig control surface script. So we load that up from our website. When you get the control surface installer from our shop, you can load the maps for Bitwig onto the Morph for the different overlays. You'll also need the fundamental Sensel map, which has a slight modification to the last preset. So once you have the Thunder overlay on here, you can hold the programmer's bar and load different presets. So this could be different scales or arrangements. In this case, preset 9 loads Fundamental, and that gives us the notes we need and the controls we need. So it is standard MPE, but these have very specific note assignments. When we use these 8 different keys, D, E, F, G, L, M, N, O, those control the 8 sine tones of Fundamental. So we can use the Y position to introduce more modulation, and the pressure introduces gain. And I can use these to scale the Y-axis or the X-axis and the MPE pressure. So you'll see down here these have a very tiny number, and that's just a multiplying factor. So that makes the gain more sensitive, or turns it off entirely, or makes it less sensitive. And similarly for the Y-axis, for the X-axis for pitch, we can modify that with the wave key here and scale how much the pitch bend is going to affect. You can also change that in this area here. The other thing you probably want to know is what presets to use. So in this case, when you press the L button, it gives you the preset interface, and you can select preset 9. You can select different presets with these top buttons on the Thunder, and then as well as number 5 and H. So as I press these are just loading different presets up here. When we press preset 9, that's loading default MPE. Now, one thing you'll notice is that this MPE modulation area is really important to using the controller. So in this case, I have all of my gain modulation and frequency modulation is expressly controlled by my touching the surface. You'll see these little orange sliders here for the gain, and then or for rather the gain modulation amount. If I had something to frequency modulation amount, for example, the pressure, you would see also another slider there indicating that we're modulating with MIDI. And so you can map different things here. The modulation itself is all driven by these modulation generators. It's very esoteric, based on sort of ideas from Xenakis. It's super cool, very great place to play around in, but the key is each one of these sort of sliders is mapped to modifying each oscillator for gain, frequency, pan, and harmonic ratio if we're using a harmonic set. So we can take a listen and see what happens. We have the harmonic. All of our ratios have changed, but our modulations remain the same here. Now, if I change presets, I now have a lot of things that are going on. So I've got constant noise. I can use the trigger to sort of trigger the noise. And we'll probably, if we wanted to sort of approximate what we had with default MPE, where everything's quiet, we would go ahead and turn the trigger on, and we can turn down the gain. So make sure we have gain selected here, and put all these sliders down. And now all of the gain is going to be controlled potentially. We have gain modulation going, so that's why we still hear things. We can sort of zero those out, so really things are going to be as quiet as possible. And now we can use MPE pressure to affect gain, and the y-axis to affect gain modulation. So that's effectively controlling these sliders, even though they don't animate. And so yeah, that's how you kind of take one of these presets, and which is really sort of storing the modulation methods here and the ratios, and then you can just do what I just did. Zero out the gain, zero out the gain modulation, and then apply MPE modulation. Now, one other great thing about the using the Thunder overlays, we can sort of create a situation here, and when we're happy with it, we can make it static with the Latch button. Now you'll see that button down here. It's kind of nice to, you can trigger it from the mouse, but if you use the J key, it creates a static situation. So now it's just going. And if you wanted to use the trigger to introduce that sound that you just created, you can do that. And then turn off Latch and create another mix, hold Latch, and now that sound is going. So that is kind of a basic idea of how to use the Morph with Fundamental. It's really an incredible way to explore stuff. Now there's a couple other things that I've added that are specific to the DAW, and I can go through that. Now this is where things get fun with the Thunder, because I've made use of these extra hex keys. Now when you're using the control surface, we have these automatically going to the instrument or to the macros of whatever device is selected. So I have X, Y, Z. I can control 6 macros with these. By default, this is set up to sort of mouse. It's sort of like a mouse where you use a relative position to move those knobs. So instead of me putting my finger over here and the X is at 0 and over here X is at maximum, I am scrolling through. The cool thing about this is that we can set a particular situation and then use pressure. Actually, pressure is not doing anything here, so how about I do it over here and then use pressure to modify things. So I have a number of effects in this. So I have Fracture XT, and that has dry wet on the x-axis here, and that's just sort of a glitch. And then I have a wet dry for the pitch delay from SoundHack. That's free, and a very cool sort of old school, almost tape delay effect. Then I've got a distortion and then a reverb, and these two are controlled on the right. So we can really create some absolutely stunning textures. Go ahead and select the device. using effects control along with the completely unusual tones you're going to get from Fundamental. So that's an overview of how to use the Thunder, why it's cool, and some clues on how to get around Fundamental. I hope you enjoy it, and have a good day.